Star Wars games have been around almost as long as Star Wars itself, covering many aspects and genres. Star Wars Uplink is a podcast and feed dedicated to covering all Star Wars games, past and future, from news to interviews and so much more. Crank up the hyperdrive because it's time for the show. Welcome to Star Wars Uplink, a podcast dedicated to Star Wars gaming. I'm your host, Goodwin, joined by Star Wars game Outpost writer, Beilby.
Hey everyone, this is an awesome time, and as Darth Vader said to Han Solo in episode 5, we would be honored if you would join us.
Yes. In this episode, we'll be introducing ourselves, what this podcast will be, and possibly talking about some news.
Let's get started.
Let's start off with introduction. What do you do?
So I write for the Star Wars Game Outpost, which is a website that I started last summer, and it covers news about Star Wars video games. The primary game that I cover is Battlefront, as it's the biggest Star Wars game out there right now. But there's also some other mobile games I cover. And then, of course, the future games that EA has planned, Visceral's Star Wars game and Respawn's Star Wars game. And so, yeah, that's my primary attachment to Star Wars and Star Wars video games, and how I kind of got into this podcast.
Yes. I had a podcast idea for Star Wars gaming because there isn't really a Star Wars gaming focused podcast that just does video games. And I was like, who can I have to guess? And I was like, there's Star Wars Game Outpost, the best Star Wars game website. I wonder if you'd be interested. And I am from the Star Wars Battlefront podcast, covering Star Wars Battlefront. We cover all aspects. We interview the developers, people that listen to our podcast, fans of people of the community. We started that 2015, before Battlefront released, and it's been pretty fun.
Yeah, you guys have really grown from what I've seen.
It was
pretty cool to see.
When we interviewed Paul Kesslin, that was crazy for the growth of our podcast.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be. And that was a nice set of interviews too. So
I had so much fun doing that too. I edited a bunch of it out, but we were talking about Star Wars books and different Star Wars stuff. It was just so much fun. So now let's go into what to expect from the podcast. And this podcast will be covering all aspects of Star Wars video game. We'll be going into the past games, talking about how they could implement these the different techniques and stories into future games, and interviewing developers if we can get them on the podcast, and just overall covering the future games, the speculation and news.
Yeah, it should be fun.
So what are your Star Wars gaming memories? What started you on the path of the Star Wars game?
Well, I mean, I started playing the Rogue Squadron series when I was a kid. I played that on my GameCube.
Yes.
And then I also played a lot of Battlefront 2, also the first Battlefront, some of the KOTOR stuff early on, the Jedi Knight series. The biggest game, though, for me was definitely Battlefront 2. I spent so many hours with that game, both on my Xbox and also on PC. And I still actually break it out every now and then because it's just such a fun game. And there's so many memories jammed in with that game that really helped bring me to Star Wars and to love Star Wars. I mean, not just the movies, but also being able to experience the games in Battlefront and being able to play that game. And there's so many fun things you can do with that game, and with a lot of Star Wars games too, but primarily Battlefront 2. I remember fighting there's this little trick you could do on Mustafar, where I think it was if you were the Empire and you spawned in as Anakin after the first command post, and you could go through and capture the rest of the command posts in like under a minute. And so that was always fun, trying to break my time, from like 57 seconds down to 56 seconds. So that was always a fun time to do. And so then, so Battlefront 2 really solidified that. And I played Battlefront 2 as my main Star Wars game for years. and then that transitioned over to Battlefront, the EA's Battlefront, which I've also enjoyed, and I've put in hundreds of hours into that over the past year and a half.
Pretty similar here as well. Started with the Lego Star Wars games, though.
Oh, those are great. Yep.
Yes. Lego Star Wars 1 and then Lego Star Wars 2 is the one I remember the most. Just playing through all of those. And then our cousins introduced us to Battlefront, and that was definitely a revelation. Like, they were like, here's this, you like Star Wars, right? And it's like, yes, I like Star Wars. I used to dress up as Luke Skywalker with my taekwondo robes. It was pretty fun. And I also had the glove as my robot hand.
Yep.
But we started with Lego Star Wars games, and then they introduced us to Battlefront. Every time we'd go over there, we would play so many hours of Battlefront. We'd wake up early, stay up super late playing that game. It was just so much fun. And like you, Rogue Squadron, I remember going into a game exchange, going in there looking for a Star Wars game. Star Wars Rogue Squadron 3, I believe, is the one I got for the GameCube, and that was super fun. Though I kind of didn't know how to play it after this certain point, so it was pretty difficult trying to figure everything out.
Yeah, I remember I had issue on there was a Dantooine mission or something.
Yes, I believe that one was it.
But yeah, it was a fun game, and I mean the other two ones are also a lot of fun. So it's a shame to see that series not have anything in the past. Was it 14 years now? Maybe.
Yeah, it was a while before we had Battlefront 2. Like, let's see, what was the last Star Wars game we got? I believe Force Unleashed 2?
Well, I think technically it might have been Xbox Star Wars Connect.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I don't know if that really counts.
I don't really count. I remember seeing the commercials for that, and I was like, that's pretty cool. I don't have an Xbox or Connect, but that seems pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it got pretty poor reviews, though.
It was definitely a while before we got another real Star Wars game.
The last, I mean, Disney Infinity in 2015 had Star Wars component.
Yeah, but that, let's see.
Yeah, and then before that, it was Connect Star Wars in 2012.
So it was definitely years apart between each Star Wars game.
Yeah, and then it would have been, before that, it would have been Force Unleashed, I believe, the Force Unleashed series before that. So yeah, it's been a few years.
Do you think we could be getting a Rogue Squadron game?
I mean, that's kind of that's my dream for the Switch.
Yeah.
I mean, that would sell me on the console, hands down. I mean, we don't know yet. I mean, I really want it to happen, but who honestly knows at this point? I think that it would be awesome to have a Star Wars game like that on the Switch. But I mean, they haven't announced anything. But I mean, it would be something that would sell like hotcakes for sure.
Yes, and even if it was like they give it to a smaller developer, say here's some money, this is the kind of game that we want you to make, and then they go out there and make it for like the Switch, because Nintendo and Star Wars used to go hand in hand, but now when you think Star Wars, you do not think Nintendo, sadly.
No, you don't. I mean, that's partially, I think, kind of the downfall of LucasArts.
Yes.
You know, in the years preceding the Disney acquisition. And I think that harmed their connection with Disney and their connection with video games in general. So, I mean, hopefully EA can help build that again.
Yeah.
With, the Visceral's game and Respawn's game. And I mean, fingers crossed for a Nintendo Switch game, because I would love to see that. And I think that would be a big selling point for the console, to have a Star Wars title that wasn't, I'm sure that in the next Lego Star Wars game, whenever that comes out, it will most likely come to the Switch.
Yeah.
But I mean, to have something that isn't Lego Star Wars would be a big selling point for that console. So
Lego Star Wars is on everything.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's on the PS Vita, it's on the 3DS, it's on the Wii U, it's on the it's on the PS4, the Xbox One, the 360. Do they still do the 360?
They might have for the last one, and then also on PC as well.
They've got it on phones as well, surprisingly.
Yeah.
So Lego games.
I mean, it's pretty. You know, it doesn't really matter what system you're on for that.
Yeah.
I will say, if they manage to bring Battlefront to the Switch, that would also be pretty cool. Just because you'd be able to play it on the go.
Yes.
Which would be fun. I mean, again, I don't know if it's coming to the Switch, but I think that would also help sell that console as well. So even though it is on other consoles, but that mobile component would really be a selling point in my opinion.
Just the aspect of being able to take Battlefront, the shooter, and if like what we've been hearing from Battlefront 2 is it's going to have a storyline, so there is some stuff you could play offline. Just to be able to take this game, like you could be playing Battlefront at home, then you take the Switch out of the dock and then just go. Like that would be crazy, and that would definitely push me over the fence of buying a Switch. Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, one thing I hope for Battlefront 2 that the first game did really well was co-op.
Yes,
it actually got a lot of good reviews for the co-op side of things. And so if they manage to have a campaign that's a co-op, that'd be really awesome. And like one of the things that they've really marketed with the Switch is the fact that, you know, you can go and you can play together with your friends and whatnot. And so being able to do that with Battlefront, and if it has the campaign and you're playing with your friends, or maybe they have skirmish again and you can go play with your friends and, you know, with your Switches, I think that would be really awesome and really fun to do. I mean, that's kind of a, you know, obviously a pipe dream at this point, but
yeah.
I think that would be a really awesome feature.
I really think EA is taking the wait and see approach because they've got a FIFA that's coming to the Switch, but I think that's the only game that they've announced for the Switch. So
yep.
If we're going to see Star Wars games, it's definitely going to be a maybe 2018 thing or really late 2017.
Yep. Who knows? Theoretically, I mean, it could be when Battlefront launches, it could launch on all three consoles and PC. Or they could also, if the Switch does well, they could hold off and maybe launch Visceral's game on the Switch.
Yes.
Whenever that comes out.
Because I saw a report that said the Nintendo Switch has a teraflop of power.
Mm-hmm.
And the PS4, the main PS4, has, I believe, 1.24 teraflops.
Yeah, I mean, the Nintendo's hardware is often underpowered compared to the other consoles, and I don't think the Switch is much different in that regard.
Yes.
And I know EA has recently had a slightly tenuous relationship with Nintendo because I don't believe they've really done much on the Wii U.
Yes.
And that largely has to do with the fact of the Wii U was pretty much a flop. I mean, there were great games, but it was marketed poorly, and
yes,
name Wii U doesn't help. So
I still meet people who think the Wii U is an add-on to the Wii.
Yeah, exactly. And so I know EA has always, or not always, but recently been a little bit skeptical of Nintendo. So I mean, it would make sense if they are holding off on and just see how the Switch does, and hopefully it does well. Because I mean, I love a lot of the games Nintendo has, and I mean, I grew up with the GameCube, I grew up with Game Boys, and so I mean, Nintendo is synonymous in a lot of ways to me with playing video games.
Yeah.
And so I want to see that company succeed, and I want to see them make good games for that console, and I think that it has potential to be a fun console down the line.
Yes.
Should they get games for it.
It looks very comfortable too. Like I've been watching so many videos on the Switch. For a day, I basically watched like 20 videos on the Switch, just like to see every aspect that I could before it was released. And everything that I've seen looks really interesting. And so I've got it pulled up here. There are 4 EA Wii U games.
Okay.
Need for Speed Most Wanted, EA Sports FIFA 13, Madden NFL 13, and Mass Effect 3.
Okay, yeah.
There are 4.
I mean, it's not like a total jump into it, but they aren't. It's not a complete just like shut down of it then.
Yeah, nah. So we could be seeing something. So do you think that Rogue Squadron could differentiate itself from Battlefront Fighter Squadron?
Oh, definitely. Battlefront's Fighter Squadron definitely is somewhat divisive. There are people who really enjoy it. There are also people who find that it doesn't match up to those older games. Largely because of the lock-on system and the fact that there's only four fighters plus a couple in the DLC. So I mean, I think that a well thought out game could certainly differentiate itself from the flight combat in the current Battlefront, because the flight combat in the current Battlefront it doesn't really have too much depth to it.
Yeah.
And so something like a Rogue Squadron game could, I think, really build upon that and break into its own sort of thing that is really fun and engaging for people to play.
Going into Battlefront 2 a little bit, what is your main hope for that? What is your new hope for Battlefront 2? If you'll allow me the pun.
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, probably the one big thing I want to see with that game is more than 4 environments at launch.
Yes.
Because that was a big complaint with the game, is that people are like, oh, there's only 4 maps, when there were 13, but they were all the similar environments. But people are like, oh, there's only 4 maps. And so I really hope that they can have more environments which help booster the more uniqueness when you're playing online. And so, I mean, right now we have those 4 plus Jakku is 5 plus 3 unique environments with the DLC. So that's 8 already. And then the Solace and the Tatooine maps in the Outer Rim DLC are kind of different from the Tatooine ones. But so we have 8 environments right now. So hopefully we can carry all of those 8, even if they don't carry over the maps, at least carry those environments over. So that way you already are starting with 8 environments and then adding 4 or 5 additional or even 6 environments. So then you get a game at launch that has, 14 different planets. And I think that would have a lot more excitement behind it. So there's that aspect that I'm hoping for multiplayer. And then I hope that the single player portion is also knocked out of the ballpark. I mean, one with the campaign. Hopefully it's an enjoyable, engaging campaign. I wouldn't expect it to be longer than, 5-ish hours, maybe a little bit longer if we're lucky.
Yeah.
And then also I hope that we get a more robust form of skirmish or instant action.
Yes.
Because, I mean, again, like Battlefront really does cater to the casual gamer and caters to people who just love Star Wars. But the issue with the current game is you're still playing online against people. And for some people who are those casual gamers, who just play a game once a week and they just want to experience Star Wars, it can be difficult when you go 1 in 25 every single time. And so having a good campaign, having a fun way to enjoy the online portions offline is also key. So, I mean, those are the 2 big hopes that I have, is more environments at launch and a more robust single player offering.
Yeah.
So what about you?
I definitely, similar, I definitely could see them doing everything that you say, because Battlefront Pandemic did this. They had the base of Battlefront 1 and then they brought it to Battlefront 2 basically. And they just took all of that, the stuff that we loved from Battlefront 1, and then upgraded it, took it, added new heroes, added the maps and all these different game modes. It could be so interesting. And the thing I'm most excited for is just them learning about all of this, because as we were going through Battlefront 1, we saw, oh, hey, they're adding skirmish. We don't know what that is, but it could be like instant action. But now that they've actually implemented that, they know the code and all the stuff that that has interested people throughout that. And I'm so excited. They've got Battlefield, they've learned from Battlefront, they've learned from Battlefield 1, and now they're going to Battlefront 2. That I'm so excited for. But as you, I'm also really hoping that they have a really in-depth campaign, because that's what people were really ticked off about for Battlefront 1. This didn't have a campaign. I mean, Battlefront 2 had a campaign, but it wasn't that good in retrospect.
No. I mean, it was still fun
Yes.
and enjoyable, but I mean, it wasn't. It was honestly just kind of instant action with cutscenes,
Yes.
and a few extra objectives. But it was still fun, and I mean, I think part of the issue is too that we were alluding to earlier is the fact that it's been 7-8 years since we've had an actual Star Wars game with a campaign.
Yes.
And so I think that was frustrating for people because they want to experience the story of Star Wars, but they just weren't able to do that quite as much with the first Battlefront.
And through the podcast, I've actually met people that aren't really interested in Star Wars itself, but they know what it is, but they go back and through these games, they find that they have interesting stories, they have good gameplay, and they continue to go back to Star Wars game because they know that they have the quality that they're looking for. So, like, that is surprising that Star Wars can say, hey, you know us, but you don't know too much. Here's a game. Why don't you try it out? Like,
yeah, exactly. I mean, there were so many good Star Wars games throughout the years that were good on their own. I mean, you look at Republic Commando, you look at the Battlefronts, you look at the KOTOR series, and they're just good on their own. The issue is we haven't had that for over 10 years.
Yes.
So,
and even Force Unleashed 2 it seemed like a DLC to Force Unleashed 1 in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I mean, like the Force Unleashed games, like they were fun and enjoyable, but they didn't have, similar levels. They weren't quite the same. They weren't quite on par with some of the games from the earlier 2000s and late 90s.
Yes, and in the future we'll be going through like what makes a Star Wars game good, but to you, when you think of a good Star Wars game, what do you think of?
I mean, I think of something that really allows you to immerse yourself in the universe of Star Wars. And so, I mean, that's something that Battlefront does well. It does other things not as well, but I think that the EA's Battlefront does that really well. It allows you to live out those Star Wars fantasies. And I think that's what can really make a Star Wars game good, be it, KOTOR, be it the original Battlefronts, be it Rogue Squadron. You're living out these fantasies that you've had, that you've watched the movies and now you're getting to experience those in a more intimate setting where you're getting to actually control a character and getting to know a character in that universe more on your own terms. So, how about for yourself?
When I think of a good Star Wars game, I really think about like all of the many aspects that make it Star Wars. Like you've got the soundtrack, which is a John Williams-ish, but with video games you can go into the different styles that John Williams has actually tried out. And if you really like the Star Wars soundtrack, John Williams in general, you should check out the podcast Rebel Force Radio and their series Star Wars Oxygen. It goes into all of the different aspects and how John Williams plays on the different tones of Star Wars and different aspects. Like he plays this note when this character starts in, like in the prequels, like when Anakin starts going to the dark side, you hear the Emperor's March, and you start hearing those little hints of Darth Vader. But another thing is definitely the story, and being able to go into the different worlds that you know and love of Star Wars and possibly go into new ones.
Yeah, no, I mean, story is so attached with the Star Wars universe. I mean, you look at the first Star Wars and how it really echoed the greater mythos story. How it goes through the hero's journey and that whole arc. And so, I mean, it's something George Lucas really nailed that with that first Star Wars. And so, I mean, that's just the idea of a good story is something that is really attached to the Star Wars brand.
Yeah, but also it's a video game, so it has to have gameplay that is good. And
yeah, exactly.
So, do you know of any Star Wars games that don't have good gameplay?
I mean, the one that jumps off right off the bat is Masters of Terrascasi. It was it came out. It was a fighting game that came out in the 90s. It came out in 1997 for PlayStation. And it was basically a terrible, terrible fighting game with Star Wars characters.
It's got a 4 out of 10.
Yeah, it's really not good. I got it because I heard about it, a few years ago. And so I got it and tried it out, and it's just not fun at all. It's the gameplay is very clunky, and it's yeah. But I mean, it's kind of fun to go back and play because it is such a bad game. But it's still a fun part of the Star Wars gaming history, just because it is part of the history, and it's maybe a place where they made a mistake, but it's still a fun thing. So I mean, that's when somebody says pick out a bad Star Wars game, that's what I think of. There's also Yoda Stories, which came out around then. That was also, I've never really played it. I have heard that it's really bad, where I believe you play as Luke Skywalker on Dagobah, kind of poke around and whatnot.
Yeah, there are Star Wars Yoda Stories. So definitely around the 90s, it seems they're experimenting and failing with different styles.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. But I mean, they also had successful games like Shadows of the Empire came out then.
Yes.
And that's when the Rogue Squadron series got its start. So I mean, it's one of those things where, they had a successful game, but then they also had, maybe a not so successful game.
Yeah, and when you think of Star Wars games, like overall, they are very, very good games.
Mm-hmm.
Star Wars definitely knows what its fans want, and that is something that a lot of franchises don't do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know Star Trek has been pretty varied throughout the years.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really, at least, I mean, I'm not a huge Star Trek fan, but at least to me, there's not really like a good Star Trek game that jumps out at me. Where I like, there's this Star Trek game. But
yeah, it's same with Marvel games as well.
Mm-hmm.
Which is really funny that Marvel and Lucasfilm are owned by Disney now, and they're
Mm-hmm.
both expanding into games, which is something we could go on into in the future,
Mm-hmm.
like how the licensing of the titles will work in the future, like with EA, how they could use the huge history and the library of Star Wars games and implement those different aspects into the future games that they're making and the different game development companies that they're going to be giving them to.
Mm-hmm. That would be a fun aspect to consider, I think.
And definitely next episode we'll be going into what genres we would like to see in future Battlefronts in future Star Wars games, and
Mm-hmm.
which development companies we'd like to see do that.
Mm-hmm. That'll be fun.
There is a huge library of Star Wars games, and it's just going to get bigger, which I'm so excited about. Now we have the games to make a podcast about, which is crazy to think about. Like, you couldn't make a Star Wars podcast with stuff to cover 5 or 6 years ago.
No, I mean, the brand honestly was dead at that point.
Yes. What do you think of Disney owning Star Wars and Lucasfilm?
Well, I think as a whole, it's a good thing. I mean, we wouldn't be here talking right now if Disney hadn't bought
Yes.
Lucasfilm. So in that regard, it's a good thing. And I think that Disney has a lot of tools that they know how to create successful products. So I think that's also good. I mean, there is the slight downside of, I mean, it's sort of difficult how to phrase this because any sort of entertainment product is made for money.
Yes.
It's just with Disney at times, I think that it could come across that, Star Wars is just a cash cow for them.
Yeah.
And so I think that is something that is dangerous. But I think that Disney has proven to be a successful company at creating good stories, creating good products throughout the years. I mean, you look at all their history with movies that they've had. You look at, I mean, you go to Disneyland and it's an awesome place. And so, I mean, I think that there is a way. I think that they can be successful, and I think overall, it's been a good thing that they purchased them. I mean, right now it's probably one of the better points in history to be a Star Wars fan, because you have all those games coming out. You have a movie coming out every year for the next couple of years, and then probably beyond that.
Forever.
You have books coming out, you have comics coming out. And so it's just a really active time for Star Wars fans, which it wasn't, 5 years ago. So, I mean, in that way, they did reinvigorate the whole Star Wars brand, which is a good thing, in my opinion. But there could be a dark side to that. I mean, I love Star Wars, and I'm always happy to see more Star Wars. So yes. I can't complain.
Exactly. And I was listening to Rebel Force Radio, and they brought up this really good point: is we will never see the end of Star Wars, which is kind of sad.
Yep.
It's like they're just gonna keep on going.
Yeah, I mean, with Disney owning it now, it's really, I mean, Disney is one of those companies that is too big to fail, pretty much. And Star Wars is a universe that has so much to give that
it can take that.
Yep, exactly. So.
And what's funny is that the wizarding world is also expanding at the same time as Star Wars. It's like,
oh yeah, definitely.
It's a good time to be both a Star Wars and a Harry Potter fan. Like, it's crazy that both of these huge franchises are going after the same thing, basically. Like with Fantastic Beasts, it's going to be Fantastic Beasts, and then a year later, or 2 years later, it's going to be Fantastic Beasts 2. Mm-hmm. With Star Wars, it's Episode 7, and then 2 years later, it's going to be Episode 8. It's like crazy to think that both of these huge franchises are doing the same thing, and it's pretty smart on Warner Brothers' part to actually choose to do it in the off season of the mainline Star Wars Star Wars movies.
No, it makes sense. And I mean, like, I enjoyed the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. It was a fun movie, so I'm looking forward to see where they go with that. And considering the success of Harry Potter, I'm not surprised that they would do something like that, because again, when you're in the entertainment industry, your job is to make money. So,
what do you think about Rogue One getting only 2 Oscar nominations?
That's something that's not really that surprising. The Oscars, there's very much a formula to what gets nominated and what wins Oscars. And so in my mind, it's not really surprising that it only got that many, just because it's not the type of movie that the Academy really enjoys picking.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, it would be great to see more Star Wars getting Oscars, but that's just not something that's going to happen, just because of how the Oscars are built and how they nominate stuff and how they award stuff. But I mean, Rogue One was an amazing movie and all that. So
yeah, but do you think that there will be a future Star Wars movie that will get an Oscar? Because honestly, I don't think there will be.
No, not if the Academy continues picking best Oscar or best pictures the way that they do. Because again, there's very much a formula to what is a good Oscar movie and what is a movie that's going to win an Oscar. And right now, Star Wars does not have that formula.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Star Wars could have the best movie of all time. That's subjective, obviously. But you could have, an amazing movie that's technically good, that has a great story, great directing, great acting, and all that stuff. But it's not going to win an Oscar just because it's a fantasy science fiction style movie. And so it's not going to win an Oscar. So, I mean, the Oscars would have to change in order for Star Wars to win an Oscar, or Disney would have to decide to make an Oscar-worthy Star Wars film, which would just be a little weird to have some sort of dramatic movie that's set in a drama that's set in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, that'd be hilarious. There's a meeting at Disney right now. It's like, how can we make an Oscar? It's like, here's how.
Yeah,
it's like,
the problem with that though is that doesn't necessarily sell movies, or sell tickets. And so I mean, Disney knows very much. You look at how Marvel is made. You look at how Rogue One is made. They know very much. They have this formula down for what's going to get people. What's going to get people into the theater to see this movie. You look at like how they're marketing Beauty and the Beast. It's been a very similar marketing tactic they've used for previous Disney movies like Frozen and Moana, where they, the way they kind of show snippets of the songs that people love, and that gets people hyped about the movie and gets them into the seats. So they really know how to market and sell movies, and that's what their goal is. So, I mean, Oscars, I think, that's not something that's really the goal of Star Wars.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, it is what it is. I mean, Oscars are kind of nice, but at the end of the day, they're just an award. And so, I mean, as long as you enjoy Star Wars, you enjoy Star Wars. So to me, it doesn't really matter if Star Wars wins an Oscar or whatnot. So.
Yeah, and like you can look at the box office and see that most of the Oscar movies aren't on there.
Yeah.
It's like, let's see, basically superhero, Star Wars, Jurassic World, superhero.
And it all comes down to knowing what the general public likes and what the general public plays off of with marketing.
Okay, so the final topic we have is Star Wars Celebration, and the recent news that EA Star Wars will be there. What do you think about this?
I mean, it's to be expected,
yeah,
in my opinion. And they haven't announced a panel yet, which is the big exciting thing. And I think they will. And I mean because the panel is something that's where we would see a reveal trailer for Battlefront 2. That's where we would find out more about Visceral's game or Respawn's game. So that's something that is going to be exciting to look forward to, because the other stuff that they kind of announced in conjunction with that, like the fact that a couple of the mobile games are going to be playable on the show floor, isn't exactly too exciting, because you can play those games on your phone right now. And then there's also a Cantina event for SWU, which they do every now and then, and isn't exactly special. So, I mean, the big thing is if they do a panel, which I think they will. I mean, they kind of alluded to it in their post recently, but that's where I would start to get really hyped. I mean, I already am hyped because, Star Wars Celebration and whatnot, but
40th anniversary, they've got stuff to look up for.
For sure. So, I mean, we'll see. It should be, hopefully we get a Battlefront 2 trailer there. I wouldn't mind also getting maybe a title on Visceral's game.
That would actually be pretty cool. So you really think that they're going to do a trailer there?
I think that it would make sense, because the first Battlefront's reveal trailer came out in April 2015 at Star Wars Celebration.
Okay.
And then they did a second trailer, or they did two trailers actually at E3 in June.
Okay, yeah.
So I think that it would make sense for them to do a reveal trailer Battlefront 2 at Star Wars Celebration, and then a gameplay trailer at EA Play in June. So, I mean, it really, if EA, assuming they do announce a panel for EA at Star Wars Celebration, I think we will definitely see a trailer.
What would you want to see for a reveal trailer? Like, how would you want it to open? Obviously, it'd be Lucasfilm fades away.
I mean, for me, probably I could see them opening it. I mean, the exciting thing would be to have them open with like an old Luke Skywalker turning on his lightsaber or something.
Oh.
I don't know if they would do that, though. I don't know how they're going to work Episode 8 stuff in. But, I mean, that would be exciting. It would be also, I mean, maybe they could start with something with Kylo Ren turning on his lightsaber. And, I mean, what I really want to see is I want to see what heroes are going to be included, because they've teased that they're going to include some new Rogue One heroes. So I'll be curious to see which Rogue One heroes get included. You know, I'd love to see Kylo Ren, Rey, and Finn and Poe in their Star Wars setting. So, yeah. So what would you like to see?
I would like to see a kind of a story-driven reveal. Like, that would be pretty interesting. Like, we kind of got this with the original Battlefront, which is they're on Endor, and then they're setting up the shield and everything, and then everything breaks loose and the battle starts happening. But maybe we have like what I'd like to see is they start on a planet we see in Battlefront, EA Battlefront 1. And then they start sneaking, this group of rebels start sneaking in, kind of like the survival mission start in Battlefront 1. And then it starts like, okay, let's go. And then it goes through the highlight reel of all the planets that they'll be showing. And at the end, they show the heroes battling. I think that would be cool.
That'd be pretty cool.
Though that might not be a reveal trailer. I think that might actually be a trailer one, or like teaser 1, trailer 2 kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, they'll probably do a gameplay trailer for multiplayer at some point, and then a gameplay trailer for the single player portion,
Yeah.
and then a launch trailer. And they might have a couple of teaser trailers put in there because there's going to be Gamescom at the end of summer, I believe.
Definitely the first of the year is Hype City. Everyone's trying to hype up their stuff, and like I had forgotten about Gamescom until you said that. That's another thing that they'll be hyping for, because that's a
for sure,
pretty big showing.
Yeah, and I mean they've been at Gamescom last year. They revealed a lot of Death Star DLC content there, and then the year before that, I want to say they revealed the Fighter Squadron trailer, and there was another trailer that they released around then as well. So I would expect them to be at Gamescom and revealing some stuff there this year too.
Yeah, I got a tweet that said you should totally do the EA Star Wars Battlefront 2 trailer. I was like, that would be awesome.
that would be pretty cool. You definitely have a good voice for that.
Thank you. The same guy followed up was like, "You're the effing Batman." I was like, "Whoa!" But I think that's it for this episode.
All right, yeah, it was fun.
Definitely fun. I am excited for the future of Star Wars Uplink and Star Wars gaming in general. If you would like to follow us, I am at SWB Podcast on Twitter.
And I am available at Star Wars or SW Game Outpost on Twitter, and then also on Facebook.
Yes, and you can also go to swgameoutpost.com to go to Star Wars Game Outpost, his website. The Twitter account for this episode, or for this podcast, is at SWUplink. I'm really surprised that we got that account name.
Yeah.
For a while I had like SW Uplink Podcast, but I was like, let me check real quick to see if Star Wars Uplink is available.
Yeah, that's pretty nice.
Another thing, if you like this episode and you would like to support the show, you can leave a review on iTunes. That is extremely helpful to get the show out there, promoted on iTunes, and help us to get more listeners. And that is helpful because when we have listeners that like the show, we will continue to post episodes and be able to grow the show.
And I think it's also helpful too to get that feedback.
Yes,
from
feedback,
reviews, so.
Definitely. You can leave feedback there, and also our email, which is StarWarsUplinkPodcast@gmail.com. That's it.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Stay on target.